So it is the 30th of October. Let's say 4069 this time. How are you doing, Ingrid?
Nice.
Ready for our fourth thanks. Ready for our fourth writers room meeting?
Yes, I am absolutely ready, Flo. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Got a page full of notes, ready to get stuck into it. Do you want to do a specific order, like tackle one person at a time? We're doing Tyler, Jeremy, and Matt today.
I don't know. Maybe alphabetical? Start with Jeremy? I don't know. Jeremy
Yeah.
comes first, right? Yes, the letter J comes first in the alphabet.
Let's go through the whole alphabet just to make sure. Yeah, okay. We can start with Jeremy. I think I have the least on him, so like I'm excited to to figure out what you've got.
Just get him out of the way. Yeah. My main issue with Jeremy is that I think initially he was an interesting character because of the figure of the medium of someone having close contact with ghosts and spirits and being tormented by that was a lot more interesting to me. But then once he, spoilers, started to go into the hunter uh,
Mm.
job description, I guess, it just kind of um, lost its grip on my attention because I don't think
Mm-hmm.
it fits him all that much. So I would have preferred him to, I don't know, do that more mystical medium type thing and not necessarily be like that badass who has
Yeah,
a
yeah.
gun and hunts supernatural creatures because he's Elena's younger brother. I'm not going to
Mm.
consider him a badass no matter what he does. So yeah, that's my main thing with Jeremy.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that him being her younger brother, like, I think we've touched on this before, and like, it just is my constant issue with Jeremy. It's that he's her little brother, which means he's our little brother. Like, like that's
Yeah,
just,
exactly. So
it's so hard to step
I'm
out of
not
that.
gonna
Like,
take him seriously.
yeah, yeah, like, sorry, Jeremy, but like, I think that in a way that could make a sense of frustration from him. Like, you guys don't treat me like I'm a grown up. You don't treat me like I'm this, that, or the other. Like, it kind of makes that a little bit more real because, like, you're just sitting there as the viewer, like, well, yeah, obviously. But yeah,
Obviously, yeah.
I get your point, and I don't love the whole hunter thing either. I feel like the medium, the whole mystical side of things is more interesting, and also like I don't know. I feel like the hunter thing it was designed to set him up against Elena, and that was like a little bit too sad for me. I don't know. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like do you remember the whole like they're at the cabin and he's trying to repress his urges to kill and all that jazz?
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and like another thing, I don't know this idea of a hunter having urges to kill, like it's something
yeah.
innate. And why isn't it just like a job that they have? Why
Yeah, why
isn't
can't
it
you just see
something?
the hunter kiosk at the job fair? Like
Yeah, exactly. Why does it have to be something so innate? Why is being a hunter also supernatural? Like I
mm,
hate it. I hate it so much. So yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. It just originated a conflict between him and Elena that was just, I don't know, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel genuine. It didn't feel like a clashing of ideologies and just something that was forced. So I
yeah.
agree 100%.
I don't like conflicts that comes out of this is what we inherently biologically are. I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
annoying to me. It's like like maybe I just went to uni and got brainwashed with the leftist bullshit, but like I don't really like when it's some kind of like biological innate. Like I don't like vampires versus werewolves. I don't like this whole like hunter urges shit. And I feel like even in the terms of the vampire bloodlust that we've discussed before, like I really do want to kind of take a bit of a different position on how it works and how people engage with it because I don't appreciate conflict that comes from that. It's lazy. Like it just feels like it's a shortcut to create conflict when you can just have conflict in more organic ways, like people being stupid and not talking to each other, like on every other TV
Yeah,
show.
definitely.
Yeah.
And just with like uh, a difference of opinion, with like disagreement,
Mm.
they couldn't have Jeremy and Elena disagree on anything fundamentally, like the treatment of
Mm.
supernatural creatures or the way they interact with supernatural creatures, with like Elena being so involved in this and Jeremy, I guess, feeling the loss a bit
Mm.
more and wanting to distance himself from that. But they don't let that happen. It has to be something that's like innate, that's activated with whatever, and it's just so
Mm.
stupid. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit more with Tyler later on, but yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Do you have any like idea of? I know you mentioned the whole medium shtick. Do you have like any idea of methods to kind of escalate that into like and have that kind of fulfill the role that him becoming a hunter did?
I don't know if this would depower Bonnie so much, but the idea
Mm.
of Bonnie being like the anger to the other side and that strong involvement with the other side, I think that Jeremy could fulfill a little bit of that role. So they kind of share the burden of having to, not necessarily to cast spells. I don't want him to be uh, a witch or magical
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, but I think it'd be interesting for him to have that stronger connection and yeah, that
Mm.
tie to the other side that we see Bonnie have in the later seasons.
Yeah, I think that could be interesting even if he and Bonnie weren't romantically linked or weren't romantically linked for long. It could be interesting to kind of like align them in that way, not necessarily in a way that would take away from the role that Bonnie can play in the narrative and stuff like that, but it would be nice to kind of bring them together. And I think that the fact that his whole medium kind of arc came from him, from what I recall, it came from him committing suicide, I believe, and then coming back. Isn't that like that's like how he connected with the ghosts in the first place, right?
I'm not sure.
Because he takes all the
I
pills. Maybe I'm messing this up a little bit in my head, but he takes all those pills and tries to kill himself, and then they kind of like bring him back, or is because I don't think Bonnie had brought him back before he started seeing Emma.
I
We're just like totally like
mm,
fucking up these
I
timelines.
am, yes, a little bit. I remember distinctly like Matt attempting to do that,
Yeah.
and Bonnie saving him. So I think
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he
I
might have
think I
done that as a reaction to Jeremy. So
yeah, I think Jeremy was where the idea came from because Matt wanted to see Vicky. Um,
mhm.
so I think that even if him committing suicide isn't the reason why or attempting to, I think they brought him back with vampire blood, but he didn't become a vampire. Oh no, was it the Gilbert ring? I don't. Or was it
It
the
was probably with the
Damon
Gilbert ring.
killed
Yeah,
him that one time as well? So maybe it was that. God, okay.
probably the
Everybody
Gilbert
just
ring. Yeah.
dies and comes back too much. We can't even. But I do
Yeah,
remember Jeremy taking a bunch of Elena's old pain pills from after her accident. So even if that's not directly connected to him becoming the anchor, I think that him having proximity to death and to the dead and to the dying in a specific way, I just would be interesting to see what that looks like for him growing into um, an appreciation for his own life in terms of his
hmm
proximity to the dead. I just think that that would be cool from a character perspective.
I
Mm.
guess wrestle with his mortality and learn to appreciate it more uh,
Mm.
because of his more intense connection with death.
Mm. Yeah,
Whereas
and
the others, like I guess it's the whole thing of trying to reject death and undeath being
mm,
the ultimate rejection of that, and Jeremy being the one who eventually has the healthiest relationship with death. So
mm. Which
that's a
it would just be so interesting,
growth
especially
for him.
because yeah, especially because in the beginning you would imagine that there would be a lot of concern from Elena and everybody who cares about Jeremy and everybody who cares about Elena in terms of Jeremy's mental health and his position on his own life and his perspective on his own life, and it would be an interesting kind of narrative circle if we're talking about Elena kind of growing into an appreciation for her own life and a rejection of the idea that she should just be ready to sacrifice herself all the time. It'd be interesting to see what role Jeremy plays in her kind of shifting of mentality in that. It's a cool like little sibling symmetry, even if they do disagree on things,
Cool.
to kind of end up with that appreciation together. What I had written down for Jeremy is that if he does become a hunter, he should do so like completely away from Elena, which continues our trend of taking everybody out of Mystic Falls constantly. But like
hmm
I just feel like we do need to establish him outside of being her little brother, or we need to just lean into and accept the fact that he's always going to be her little brother. So I think that this idea where his kind of journey mirrors hers or like is responsive to hers in a more organic way probably resolves that issue for me.
I think that most of these characters could do with having a bit more development outside of their very limited circle and outside of Elena, especially in the conflict that she has with Stefan and Damon in that
Mm.
situation. So, yeah, I definitely think that he could seek mentorship, and I don't know, guidance from people outside of Mystic Falls, and that
Mm.
contributing to that could possibly contribute to their, I guess, difference in opinions and ideas eventually. Like if he does become a hunter,
Mm.
he's, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but like he's going to be brought up with these differing opinions from what Elena and the rest of the supernatural gang believe in. So I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, it would be important to consider just like super basic confirmation bias, where Jeremy is obviously seeking out situations in which you know a vampire is doing something dangerous, versus Elena just kind of existing alongside vampires who sometimes are dangerous but maybe try not to, and who she obviously has a lot of compassion for. So like there's a difference between Jeremy hunting vampires, who the only ones you'd be able to find to hunt likely would be ones who are killing humans anyway, versus like, so he's constantly in contact with that situation and constantly aware of that potential, versus like he would then be the expert on the danger but also be hyper aware of it, whereas Elena would have like a completely different position based on her experiences with the vampires in her life. So like it would be a cool difference to kind of play around with. The only other thing I had written down for Jeremy is like probably something for a different meeting where we talk about side characters and stuff like that, but it's just good just because he's the most connected to this, is that like I kind of wish that Anna was used a little more interestingly, and possibly like she could play into his perspective on vampires. I mean, she does in the show certainly, in an interesting way as we're kind of like constructing it here. So like that would be something to think about in the long run. What do you think of the Jeremy Anna situation?
I would have liked to have seen more of Anna on the show, and I do think that she is able to offer that different perspective, like for him to feel compassion towards a vampire that him being a hunter is like teaches him to reject. So I think that would be interesting to play up, but that would involve Anna surviving for longer than she did. So
I
that's
think
important.
I think maybe what I'm remembering of him taking a bunch of the pills, I think he had already taken some of Anna's blood and he was trying to become a vampire. I think maybe I'm wrong. It wasn't actually a what we would consider to be a suicide attempt. I think maybe he was trying to be a vampire. So I guess that like maybe alleviates some of the mental health approach, like kind of just takes that away a little bit and makes it more about his position, his perspective on vampires and being undead. So it could be cool to walk down that road.
I think we need to rewatch some of the earlier seasons.
I have rewatched like season 1, I think. But in my defense, my house is falling apart, like, as we speak. So, so it's hard. And so is yours. Like, well, not fully, but, like, leaks in everybody's house.
Yeah, not anymore, but it was falling apart up until a couple of weeks ago. So
yes. Yeah, as that biblical parable goes, don't try and watch CW TV shows if your house is falling apart. Remember that part?
Exactly.
I think that was Leviticus. Yeah. Okay. Did you have anything else for Jeremy?
No, for Jeremy, I'm good.
Okay, cool. So, tick next to that name. In alphabetical order, is Matt next? Or hang on, let me go through the alphabet in my head.
It's Matt.
LMNOPQRST. Yeah, it's Matt. Matt is next. Okay. Are we going by the first or last name for alphabet?
I went with first.
Yeah.
But because if it were last, Matt would have been the first. Oh, yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
So Matt, let me see. What can we do to Matt? The perfect character, besides everything that happens to him. I think I would have preferred the hunter subplot to have happened to Matt.
Mm-hmm.
So if Jeremy leans into the medium thing, then I like the idea of Matt becoming a hunter. And once again, if it's not something innate, so he doesn't have to be supernatural or supernatural adjacent to be a hunter. It's just something that he decides that he wants to do because of the way that vampires and other supernatural creatures, because of what they do to his town. So I think that would be better. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea of him being like a Van Helsing type of figure.
Yeah.
So
well, we're replacing Alaric with Matt. So
yes,
I think that Matt slots into some of that situation with a bit more empathy, both in his character and I would say I have a bit more empathy for Matt than Alaric. I've written down
Absolutely.
here. I've written down here. First responder that isn't a cop on my list. So like
Mm-hmm.
my thought was that Matt obviously has this drive to take care of people and a quite negative response to certain aspects of the supernatural world. So I was wondering if some kind of role that might encourage, like, put him in a position to help people, but it's not, it's not a cop who like I just don't see why it makes sense for Matt to become a cop, not even just in terms of how you and I might feel about that kind of dynamic, but he would know that being a cop in a small town just basically, like, if there isn't necessarily a high crime rate in Mystic Falls, right? Like we might accept that there's vampire activity, but there isn't necessarily like this huge need for him to be interfacing with the community on like traffic stops and shit like that. Like there's just no, I don't see why he would want to be doing that, why he'd want to spend his time doing that. So yeah, my thought was some kind of like he's actively pursuing and entering situations to help people in a way that's not, he's not there to be punitive in any way. He's not there to keep a record of what people have done wrong necessarily. He's entering those situations to take care of them because he wants to and he feels like he has that knowledge. So I think the hunter kind of subplot would kind of fill that need pretty neatly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I also don't understand the decision to have him become a cop because, like you said, uh, what happens in Mystic Falls, it's not really a crime.
Mm.
So him being a cop and wearing the uniform and having a gun, like a pistol or whatever,
Mm.
doesn't necessarily make much of a difference. So I would have preferred him to like be equipped with stakes and holy water. And once again,
Mm-hmm.
we are leaning into the vampire lore
Yeah.
as it is classically. So lots of very
Mm.
stylish crucifixes and holy water and things like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah, you
yeah,
get lots of
definitely.
like suit up montages. He has like a full like anime girl transformation thing when he gets into his gets into his hunting gear.
Yes, exactly. Like what are those? I don't know, shoulder holsters
Yeah.
that some people have. Like, but it stakes. It's
Yeah.
just giant wooden stakes under
Yeah.
his shoulders. Like I don't know. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah. I think it would be cool. I mean, this kind of answers, like, we had a lot of problems. I remember in talking about his major for college
Mm-hmm.
because like I think that he would have gotten in on football most likely, but I just don't see why his interest would be like why would he care about football? Like still, I just don't see that as something that
Mm-hmm.
holds his attention. Not because a man can't have hobbies, but like maybe because I over identify with Matt Donovan and I don't care about football. so so um but yeah, I think that this kind of answers that question where he kind of gets to this point in his degree where he's still undecided. He still doesn't really like see a lot of these different parts as valuable. He doesn't see how he's going to use like fucking art history or like majoring in theater production or anything like that. Like he's in Rent. He's done that. Like he's over it. Like I like the idea of
Mm-hmm.
him then stepping into hunting in an interesting way. That would be cool. I like this. I like this a
Yeah.
lot. Good job.
Yeah. Thank you. You too. Um, what I would mention about the whole football thing is that I kind of get the idea of
Mm.
him wanting to pursue football just because it's something that's familiar and it's something that at the very least affords him a little bit of opportunity, I guess.
Yeah.
So uh, he would pursue that only for that sake, only because he's constructed a part of his identity for so long with that, and he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really know uh,
Yeah.
where else to go. And I think that this
That makes
college
sense.
experience and becoming a hunter and not deciding is his opportunity to find that other parts of his identity to him
Mm.
for him to construct this identity in
Yeah,
that sense.
exactly.
So I
And
don't
I
know, I just a comfort, I guess.
Yeah. And I also would imagine that football would probably have been one of the only spaces where, because obviously he has friends, he has quite a large social circle, but it would probably be one of the only situations where he kind of has positive, consistently positive interactions with adults. Like if his parents aren't really showing up for him, like it's reasonable to expect that he has attached that situation and that interest to being successful, having friends, enjoying himself. Obviously, it's like enjoyable to run around on a football field and be successful. Like
Is
that's
it
like a
though?
big.
Is it?
I know, but like I haven't had that experience personally because crippled, but but I but I would imagine that it feels really good to have achieved something, especially in a team scenario, that would just be
Mm-hmm.
really exciting. It's kind of like recording some kind of podcast or achieving something in the workplace, or like just having that sense of like, that's where I'm coming at it from, like this feels like hitting a deadline. So of
Right.
course he would
That little boost of
associate with that.
serotonin.
Yeah, exactly, and all the
Mm-hmm.
adrenaline involved and that sort of thing. It would be cool. So yeah, I get what you're saying about his attachment to it, but it would be nice to see him find. It'd be cool if he like coached on the side or something like that. I think that would be cute. He's like
Yeah,
hunting,
that
but he's got
would.
to get
Yeah.
home for like Saturday at 9 a.m. to be coaching for
Oh,
Little
that's
League.
so cute. Yeah.
That would be cool. Did you have anything
That's
else written
way
down for
better
Matt?
than him becoming a cop.
Yes, exactly.
Um, Other than him being a bisexual icon, I
Mm-hmm.
think. I
Yeah,
think that
that's
he's
settled.
perfect and nothing changes. Yeah.
Yeah. What I have, it's not something that, because this is just isn't like, it's just not something that often occurs to me. Like obviously that would be the case with this character, but it's just something that I've been kind of like looking for in the main cast. And my kind of methodology for growing characters of demographics that I'm not a part of is usually to just look for my favorite one. It's like if I'm writing
Mm-hmm.
original fiction, it's usually, and like for example, I might reach a point where I'm like, oh my god, I don't have a trans character on this cast, and so I pick my favorite ones because I know that I'm going to give them a certain level of attention naturally, because that's already where my attention is directed. So I guess my question is whether or not we, because I think we have talked about incorporating more LGBT characters, and I mean, you can do that in one of two ways with a cast that's already all like cis het. Basically, you can either introduce
Mm-hmm.
secondary characters who are like occasionally there, or you can kind of like assess your situation with your main characters. And my question would be for Matt is that is whether or not we would want to elevate bi icon Matt Donovan to bi and trans icon Matt Donovan.
I do love that idea, actually. We would have to consider, like, the casting, since
Yeah.
we can't have all the actors repeat the roles in
Well,
this case.
some of
That
them
probably
won't make it
wouldn't
out
work.
of cryogenic freezing. I imagine.
Yeah. I do love that idea. I
Mm.
think that it's better to have people in the main cast, I guess, that, like you said, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to dedicate a lot of time, a lot of development into.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I do like the
yeah.
idea of
I
trans
will.
icon Matt Donovan.
Yeah, I will admit that it's like a bit of a hard one to get stuck into because I'm cis and I'm just like not going to be like, okay, so here are how his current experiences might impact that. Here's how certain things are influenced by these new experiences that we're trying to bring in. And I also am not super into the idea of having a major plot line for him that involves a ton of transphobia. Like, I just don't think that that's like, I think we have enough of a story without suddenly needing a lot of like different kinds of bigotry that we don't experience to suddenly be driving it. Like, that can get really
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
awful.
Yeah,
And
definitely,
yeah.
of course.
So like it would just obviously need some consideration, and I'd be super keen to hear from anybody listening that might have any thoughts on this, coming from any different perspective. But yeah, I think that it would be just nice to kind of like have that in mind as we're building Matt. And the only thing that I like kind of noted that would be impacted by this is that we have discussed him stepping into Alaric's role, and Alaric as a cis man has two children with two cis women somehow, because that's just how the like magical pregnancy happens. And I just don't really see any reason why it wouldn't be possible for Matt and Joe to have involved some kind of like a surrogacy situation, and that changes like literally nothing in my opinion, changes nothing about his connection to the twins after Caroline is then pregnant with them. Like, I just don't see why like why that's just not like okay, so we would just answer that in that way. um that's my only note
Mm-hmm.
about this was like as I was going through it, like thinking about what we've said about Matt so far. So other than that,
Right. Yeah, I think that could totally work. We could. That's a really easy thing to work around.
mm-hmm,
One thing that I guess I don't know I would add is that since we are I guess leaning towards this idea of Matt building his identity through this college experience
mm-hmm,
and discovering who he is outside of like football, outside
Mm-hmm.
of his social circle, outside of the very, I don't know, the few things that Mystic Falls as a small town offers him. I guess that could involve
Mm.
playing around with gender. So maybe like non-binary Matt, sort of
Mm.
maybe gender fluid, gender queer, something to that effect,
Mm-hmm.
where he feels a bit more free to play around with his gender and express it in different ways.
It'd be nice for us to approach it from a fluid way that's obviously also responsive to anybody's thoughts as they write in about this. Because like I also think that as you once you have acknowledged, because the Vampire Diaries universe doesn't do this, once you've acknowledged that you have vampires and trans people in the same universe, there are some kinds of like questions of what it means to become a vampire and to be trans and that sort of thing. And so I think that I would be super interested to hear thoughts like from any trans people about what they think about that process and how that would feel. Because like I feel like it's kind of there's an obvious similar journey in terms of how the Vampire Diaries talks about. Like I think they even call it transition. Like it's I would imagine that there are positive and negative connotations and feelings and perspectives on that kind of alignment. So I'd be super interested to hear about that, as we also would think about obviously other trans cast members as well. So cool. That's Matt. Done. So number two, number T, letter T. look, I'm so tired. Okay,
Oh God.
so okay, so Tyler, what did you have written down for Tyler, Ingrid?
Okay, so my main issue with Tyler, this is like a big one for me, is that I really hate the idea that in the Vampire Diaries, lycanthropy and being a werewolf is hereditary. Like it's something that
Mm-hmm.
is passed down through your family, and it manifests itself in like having these anger issues and being aggressive and all that stuff. Because, for one, I think it's way less interesting than like the whole being bitten by a werewolf, you become a werewolf. I think that's cool. I think that's an interesting part of like werewolf lore. I'd be super psyched to include that. But it's very noteworthy, I guess, that the only Latino actor, one of the few actors of color in the main cast,
Mm-hmm.
is portrayed as being inhuman or portrayed as being animalistic, and that is something innate. That is something that's natural to him
Mm-hmm.
because of his like blood, because of his family, because of his heritage. I despise that so much. So
Yep.
uh, get rid of that. I hate
Yeah.
it.
God. I had written down. I think because I think what's very like it is it like exactly as you say. It's like ridiculous that the only person because like I would say that Stefan and Damon are also kind of aligned a little bit with animalistic urges and that sort of thing, but in their case, it's not biological. It's not a biological quality that they have to become vampires. So, so when we're talking about like hereditary, I mean, we've also done this with the hunter thing, like a hereditary, like you're just inheriting something that's innate about you versus pursuing it yourself. Also, in terms of Bonnie's magic, like I think that we are kind of bending in the direction of shifting a lot of the law towards in a way that's it's less about what you are destined to be and more about where your attention is drawn, and it's then tied more closely to character development and stuff like that. What I had written down for the kind of like werewolf lore, because that's obviously just all completely related to Tyler, especially in the first few seasons, is that doing away with the kind of alpha hierarchy stuff for werewolves, because from what I have come to understand, like I just saw an article about it and then went down the rabbit hole, is that alphas actually aren't naturally occurring in wolves, in just wild
Mm-hmm.
wolves. There aren't alphas. That's not how it works. There was assumed to be for a while. That was assumed to be how it works based on a study that kind of suggested that there was just this alpha wolf that was the strongest and was in charge of everybody else. But the study was done on wolves in captivity, and so the guy that conducted it is now like on kind of like a rampage to try and walk back what has happened as a result of his research. He said, "No, I did more research. I discovered I was wrong," and has kind of walked back and basically said that, from what I understand, I'm certainly not in the field, but from what I understand, the alpha behavior, the aggression in particular, is a maladaptive response to stress conditions and to scarcity. So when wolves are in their natural habitat and when they're engaging healthily in an ecosystem, it's a lot more diffused, the power structures. So you respect the ones that are older than you respect the ones that gave birth to you or that raised you. There's there's a structure, but it's not this hierarchy as we understand it through a lot of werewolf fiction now. It's not the fucking Omegaverse. So so what
Oh God. Yeah.
so what I kind of wanted to address was this aggression in a way, but it shouldn't be biological, but just in terms of walking back the aggression and how we understand that, eliminating the Omegaverse adjacent behaviors in how we understand who needs to obey who and how alphas work and stuff like that. And I think that what you've suggested about removing the biological element is helpful in terms of that.
Yeah. It's very interesting how this faulty study that applied exclusively to wolves, and we've taken this and blown out of proportion and used it to explain human behavior as well,
Mm-hmm.
and how that's informed werewolf lore.
It would be cool to jump back into that. I would say that there probably is still like there's just still, as soon as you start to like suggest that a person is adjacent to an animal, there's like this set of like kind of overblown aggressive behavior and that kind of thing, that I think that automatically, not because this is obvious or because it should be the case, but just automatically in people's minds starts to apply. So there would probably still be, in classic werewolf lore, some pretty significant issues that we wouldn't necessarily want to just like slap onto Tyler, obviously. But you're right, it would be totally cool to go back and see what werewolf lore kind of looks like, because I don't think that I have actually consumed any werewolf related media that's older than the Vampire Diaries. Even I don't think so. That would be cool. Yeah. So
Yeah, I don't think I have either.
nice.
I don't know. Besides the general idea that I have about the American Werewolf in London, I guess.
Yeah,
But
I've
it
listened
would
to the
be
song
interesting to
Werewolves
revisit
of
that.
London. Does that count?
Hmm.
I think that's older than that's all definitely
I
older than
think
the
that
Vampire
counts.
Diaries.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so if we kind of strip away the biological elements of becoming a werewolf, I think what we have left is Tyler obviously needs a specific circumstance that turns him into a werewolf. And also his kind of relationship with his dad can still be like totally abhorrent, but doesn't necessarily, because like I felt like it was very much about the fact that his dad was a werewolf, was a part of their dynamic and part of the aggression and even part of the abuse there. So I guess
Mhm.
in my notes, in terms of addressing the whole alpha situation, is like if alpha behavior is a maladaptive response to scarcity, to stress in certain situations, like what does that kind of say about Tyler and his dad's relationship, and how Tyler is afraid of his dad, and his dad is like quite aggressive towards Tyler. So what does that do to how Tyler feels and how he then engages with other people and his own masculinity and his identity as a werewolf and that sort of thing. But if his dad isn't a werewolf, we can kind of still keep that dynamic, I guess. Like, I mean, it feels mean to say like we can keep the awful shit that his dad does as long as we kill his dad off, because like I just need that personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think it would make sense for Tyler to have a bit of a like for the understanding of how actual wolf societies work to impact how Tyler would receive his treatment from his dad after he becomes a werewolf, and kind of how he reshifts his thought. But yeah, do you personally feel that there is any like perfect way to, not perfect, but like decent enough way to kind of build up a character of color who is a werewolf? Like, do you feel like the proximity to animalistic behaviors is just too much in general, like in all of the cases so far in media? Sorry, that's a huge
Mhm.
question.
Yeah, that is a huge question. And like disclaimer, I'm white,
Mm,
so that's obviously going to affect my answer. But
mm-hmm,
I do think there should be a way for us to incorporate characters of different backgrounds in the supernatural context. So I think that introducing other characters who are werewolves,
mm-hmm,
who are white and of other ethnicities and
mm-hmm.
backgrounds, I guess, just to diversify it a little bit and not associate being a werewolf with being a person of color, with
Yep.
being from like this one specific family, and which just happens to be like, well, his family. I don't remember the actors who played Tyler's family,
I
but
feel like
the interesting thing about Tyler is that he is Latino. He's played by a Mexican American actor,
mm-hmm,
but he's there's like no mention of that.
mm-hmm,
There's nothing in the show that alludes to that at all, to his cultural background or anything like that. But
mm-hmm. I
I
feel
don't know.
like the Lockwoods are just written as a white family. I mean, that's obviously an
Mm-hmm.
imperfect descriptor because it's a matter of it's really a matter of eliminating any culture that isn't a specific subset, and therefore, like in the absence of something else, they are therefore a white family. But like I feel like it just the way that I watch it is like I just don't see any of this present. So like, would we want to incorporate more? Like I don't want to be like, well, we need to incorporate more. Like we should incorporate more, for example, Mexican American culture from that time period into his family, but also his dad's going to definitely be abusing him this whole time. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just feels like
Right.
the show is set up. There's just like 1,000 tripwires here. Like it's like quite an awful situation. And also like I have written down here that like we need to also remove the situation where he sexually assaults Vicky in the first episode, because like
Mm-hmm.
for some reason that was like a thing that was on multiple CW shows at the time, is that like the kind of bad boy kind of character would sexually assault somebody in the first few episodes of their show, and then they would never be mentioned again. Like they did it on Gossip Girl as well. They did it with Damon here as well. So if we are addressing that with Damon, we obviously need to do that with Tyler. Like it's quite tricky in terms of how he's already written.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. It is very,
Hmm.
I don't know, very strange to try to redeem his character when in the very first episode he did something like that. But it really is showing a bias of the writing team with regards to him for being a Latino actor. Like, I'm not saying that this was intentional, but I do think that some of the stereotypes for Latino men might have bled into the
Mm-hmm.
way that they build his character and his family. So
Yeah.
there's aggression, there's animalistic behaviors, and all of that is just associated with him specifically.
Mm.
And I would like uh, to remove that as much as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I would like to
Mm-hmm.
point out that they are still doing that. Well, still, we can pretend that we're in the year 4000 as much as we want, but like currently it's 2021 and Legacies is airing, and they're still doing this with werewolves. Just by the way, they just have,
They are.
yeah, they're doing that with, I believe on Legacies, because what's basically happened is the like four kinds of main characters from the cast who have appeared on the previous TVDU shows are white, right? So they obviously want to build a different kind of cast that is a lot more diverse and reflects American society. In I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that the show is set in 2021. I think it's like several years ahead even, but like obviously they are casting with diversity in mind, which excellent, fantastic. But what's essentially happened is because the four white characters are three female witches and one human headmaster, if they want to fill out their cast with werewolves and vampires, they're often looking for actors of color to do this. And the actors of color doing it are incredible at their jobs, and I love the characters and I enjoy the show, but like they are still doing this with their vampires and with their werewolves. So like both main recurring werewolves on Legacies have been actors of color, whereas most of the witches are white. Like and often and also there's like a gender breakdown as well. So it's like white
Mm-hmm.
women doing all this magic, and then men of color who are feeding on people as vampires and who are having werewolf transformations and who are out of control. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
they're still doing this. It's still happening. So yeah, it sucks. I agree, and it's and especially when there
It
are
does.
lots of characters involved on either side of it, it becomes pretty obvious. So I feel like we can do it with Tyler. Like we can make it. I think filling out the cast with more people of color, in the
Mm-hmm.
first place assists with this. I think having more white werewolves is a good answer. I just feel like it's hard to grapple with this. I imagine it would suck as a fan of color engaging with the content.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does it
Definitely.
mean to be making transformative content about from source material that just does this shit constantly for over
Mm-hmm.
a decade at this point?
Where are the sensitivity consultants
Yeah,
for the
let's
CW, please?
let's go. Like I feel like it would it's my worst nightmare to be, I mean, it's my worst nightmare to be an actor, but it's my worst nightmare to be an actor on a show that is writing my character in a specific way and there is no sensitivity consultant involved that would kind of like speak on behalf of the community that I'm a part of and that I would be seen as representing on the show. Like I just like I'm absolutely not deciding how these actors feel about roles in relation to racism on the show or sexism on the show, etc. But like it would just be so awful to me. So like like why are there like where are the sensitivity consultants? Because you can't like why like are the actors supposed to say this? Are they supposed to point out when they get a script? Like that's to me that feels like the only other answer is like if you don't have a sensitivity consultant to write something. I mean I don't know
Mhm.
what the makeup of their writers room is like. Maybe it's different from what we're assuming, but maybe it's not.
Right. And I think that this is a huge problem in legacies in particular because all of the actors are so young.
Yep.
So for them to have to deal with this
Mm-hmm.
and not have any sort of support
Mm. In
from
in
the
addition,
team or from sensitivity consultants is just
yeah,
a nightmare, truly.
yeah, in addition to being young, I would say it's also different being young on a TV show in 2021 versus being young on a TV show in 2009 is very different because in 2009 you weren't going live on Instagram 3 times a week. So
Hmm.
every time these actors go live on any kind of platform, they're just bombarded with questions that they couldn't answer. Like some of them are totally benign. It's like, oh, when is this going to happen with your character? When is that going to happen? When is this person coming back? It's like as if like Quincy Faust doesn't know when Rebecca Michelson is coming back on Legacies. This is ridiculous bullshit. Like he probably finds out when the Entertainment Weekly article drops, like for the rest of us. So like it's just these constant questions about ships and stuff like that. And so when questions come up about, for example, homophobic stuff in the show, or like when fans are upset about, because like I would preface this with saying, now that we're just talking shit about Legacies, social media stuff. What I would say is, in terms of homophobia on Legacies, is that just as a queer viewer, I would say that there isn't a lot of outright homophobia on the show. There's a few double standards and like weird shit where they're like kind of playing with the idea that people could get together and they don't. But like people just constantly ask the actors about it as if they have control over it, and some of these actors are LGBT and are being asked if they're homophobic on Instagram
Oh
lives.
my god.
Like,
Jesus Christ.
like what the fuck? So yeah, it would just be so awful to be stuck between, as the public face between the fans and the decisions being made in the writers' room, would be exquisitely awful. I hope they're being paid excellently. So, do you have thoughts for the exact situation in which Tyler should become a werewolf? Let's just keep going back
Um,
to our actual topic for this
okay,
episode.
Tyler, please. I don't know. I would have to think a bit more about it because all I'm thinking of is season one of Teen Wolf,
Mm.
and I think that season one of Teen Wolf is perfect, but I don't know if I want to recreate that 100%. So, but I do like the idea, and this could tie into Klaus,
Mm.
uh,
Yeah.
his connection to Klaus, I guess, but uh, just the classic idea of being attacked
Mm.
by a werewolf in
Yeah.
some circumstance and having to deal with this like werewolf puberty
Mm.
and being accosted by your fellow jock asking where you
Where you get your juice.
where you get shoes. So I
Yeah.
think that should be a subplot in Tyler's
Yeah, Matt's like, where you get your
situation.
why? Like, are you on some kind of like random black market bullshit right now?
But
Like
like
I,
Does says it from a place of concern,
yeah, like
like
what are you
dude, are
doing?
you okay? Are you taking some
Vicky gets
juice or
all our
whatever? I don't
juice.
know. Like,
Oh no, Tyler wouldn't say that. That's Matt's sister. Yeah, my mom gets all my
yeah,
juice.
yeah.
Oh, excellent. I think that what I do really like about the werewolf lore as it is on the show is that they kill someone to trigger it. I just feel like that's so interesting in comparison to the vampire one because it basically makes them like because I love some symmetry. I love me some
Mhm.
symmetry. It's like to become a vampire you have to die and to become a werewolf you have to kill. So like this idea is so it's like just really interesting. It was just really fascinating to me. Uh, but I guess we could either keep that kind of quality where you have to kill to complete the transformation. I don't really like that. I don't really like the idea of Tyler like killing somebody. But like we would have to figure out what the timeline looks like. Like if you are bitten and then you kill, like, I don't know, like, oh my god. Oh, holy shit. What if it's like bees and like when a bee stings you, they die? Or the werewolf that bit you.
Werebees. Tyler's a werebee.
They like lose their teeth in you.
Oh my god, it's awful. I hate it. But do I though? I think I kind of love
it's
it.
kind
No,
of
I hate it.
gruesome.
Never
It's
mind.
kind of gruesome.
It is a little bit gruesome. Like, I don't know, the teeth kind of dig into you, and that's what causes the transformation. Like, the poison seeps out of that. I don't know. It's
Yeah, I mean,
it's
I'm
weird.
I'm weeping with laughter at the idea of the vampire who bites you dies for some reason, but like it is like a little bit raw. Like, imagine if being a werewolf prolongs your life, or something like that. Well, there's just something about it that has this quality of there's a certain point where you're done. Like you just have this understanding that you're done being a werewolf, and like there's this process of passing it on. And I think that would probably
Mm.
end up being often occurring along bloodlines. Like you would then transform your child or your grandchild. So it's not necessarily that it has to be, but that it often is. And so in terms of how then people kind of treat treat the whole like alpha myth and stuff like that, it's like essentially an inheritance, but not in the strict like biological sense. You could, adopt somebody and then have them be your werewolf heir. Like it would be totally possible to do that.
Ooh, I do like that idea, actually.
Yeah, that would be cool.
This is not necessarily the thing about the werewolf dying as soon as he bit someone, but maybe
like,
this idea of...
It's so funny. I don't know
weird. That is pretty fun. But this idea where they do like have a very specific and rigid hierarchy, I guess. Not necessarily a hierarchy, but in the sense that they do try to keep their power structures through that by turning people who are loyal to them in the same way, I guess, that vampires do with their covens. So I think that would be an interesting form of symmetry. I almost said something else.
Yeah. And I think it would be cool if, like, let's say that there is generally understood to be, like, let's say you can pass on the being of a werewolf to somebody else, and then you are no longer, like, it's like supernatural tag. Like, you're not a werewolf anymore. Like, it's not necessarily that everybody who transforms somebody else into a werewolf has to be ready to die, necessarily. Because, I'm sorry, it's so funny, like, because I'm just picturing somebody, like, just biting somebody else even by accident, like it's just like some kind of BDSM dungeon shit, and then they're just like done, and they're just like on the floor. No. It's like, oh my god, we talked about this.
Oh goodness, yeah.
This was not safe, sane, or consensual. Can we not?
No. Oh my god, this is going in a different direction than I thought it would.
Well, the alternative is that like anybody who is born with any kind of like werewolf gene or anything like that, when they bite somebody they die. Like it's just really funny. Just like, because we need them to be 100% opposite to the vampires involved. So if you bite somebody, you die. Have fun navigating the world as like a fucking 3-year-old who wants to bite everybody they meet. Like, just like impossible.
Oh no, it's horrible. I hate it.
When my brother was a kid. When my brother was a kid, my oldest brother, he was so bad about biting other kids that like my parents couldn't leave him unattended at any play dates or anything like that. Like if it was a play date for him, it was a play date for them. Like they had to be there ready to like literally hook their fingers into my brother's mouth to unhinge his jaw, because he would just like be 1-year-old and bite every single kid. He was like,
so can you
aggressive.
imagine this werewolf like thing? Oh my god, no.
Yeah.
What do you have? My teeth. No.
Okay. Well, we clearly have a real good understanding of what we want the lore to look like.
Yeah. I feel this feels solid, as solid as the grip that the Vampire Diaries showrunners and writers had on the lore itself as well. So
yeah, I feel like we've had more fun though.
Following their footsteps. Yeah,
we've had more fun. Unless they've got like a picture of margaritas in the Vampire Diaries like writers room. That would probably outdo our like sitting down in leaky houses to record by remote. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, so
Okay.
I feel pretty good about just knowing that we have a question mark over how Tyler becomes a werewolf, like knowing that there needs to be some kind of event that occurs, because then we
Mm.
could kind of like keep an eye on how to tie that into an existing plot line. Like it wouldn't make sense for just like Tyler is walking along the road in like episode 12 of season 2 and somebody just comes out of the darkness and just bodies him. Like like we'd have to build it in a specific way.
Mhm.
But I feel good about having that there, and then understanding that Tyler's relationship with his family plays a role in his in how he develops as a werewolf. Not in terms of like he develops poorly in some way, or like imprints bad behaviors as a wolf because of his family, but like Tyler having to step away from his dad's behavior. Because like
Mhm.
Tyler's dad is just so status obsessed in the show. Like he's just so, because he's the mayor, like, but he's just such an asshole. He has that like horrible, like the point at which I decided that I might like Alaric Saltzman was when Rick, like, I stepped in and like threatened Tyler's dad. I was like, okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
But then obviously that was ultimately ruined. But because I feel like Alaric is now just as bad, but whatever. I feel good about knowing a direction, not necessarily knowing every single step, but just kind of knowing what we're looking for and what we want to happen for Tyler.
Yeah, I feel good about it too. I feel like we can put a pin in that and revisit it soon, as soon as we maybe mature some other ideas and some other subplots for other characters. So I think that we will revisit this and it will develop beautifully.
Okay, excellent. So we have a whole bunch of things we floated in this meeting that are like uncertain, definitely looking for feedback on. So if anybody wants to drop their thoughts in to us, we are accessible via contact at revamppodcast.com. Uh, and I believe we already have some feedback there, so we might address that in our next meeting.
You could also send us an ask on our Tumblr at revamp-podcast.tumblr.com. So if you have any feedback or any suggestions, leave us a note.
Yep, excellent, excellent. So next time we'll just talk about some of the feedback we have so far, and maybe if we have any. Do you feel like you have a lot of outstanding issues or questions in terms of what we've covered in the like past 4 episodes?
No, I think that we can react to some of the messages that we've received and move on from here.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks for hanging out, Flo. It was very good to see you. It's not to see you, to hear you. It was very good to hear you.
Well, maybe we're on Skype. They don't know.
Oh, yeah, true. They don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, now they know.